Hey guys, this is Nia and today I will be continuing on with the mini flower series, and today I will start with the filler flowers, which is basically a bunch of small flowers that acts as fillers around large flowers in bouquets. I'm going to start easy by using small flowers in the single flower series and by playing around with the stems and downsizing the flower size. Like usual, let's start by drawing out the shapes first. For the first one, I'm going to create a couple of 4-petal flowers and finishing off with small rounded leaves that grows out similar to ferns. For the second flower, I'm going to draw out long stems and I'm going to make loose heart shapes and draw these tiny flowers on either side of them, and I'm going to do the same with the other stems. Then I'm going to finish off with small leaves placed randomly around. For the third filler flower, I'm going to draw up 3 stems, and for the flowers I'm going to draw small circles which represents dots. When I'm painting them later, I want to create a long silhouette that comes to a tip at the top, and I'm going to place the flower on top of all the 3 stems, and then I'm going to finish off with leaves. For the rest of these, I'm going to draw out basic leaf shapes, but you may also draw out any types of leaves that you would like. Next, I'm going to draw a long stem with some stems branching out. You don't have to make one exactly the same as mine. You can try to make as many branches or as little as you want. Then for the flowers, I draw out small 5-petaled flowers, then finishing off with some medium-sized leaves. For the fifth flower, I'm going to draw out 3 branching stems, and for the flowers, I'm going to create curved lines facing up, and I'm going to draw out lines to fill the shapes, then finish off with tiny leaves. Next, I'm going to make one main stem with leaves zigzagging on either sides. The leaves that I'm making for this is quite large, and instead of flowers, I'm drawing circles to represent berries with 3 berries per bunch on each stem. The 7th flower is very simple. Again, I'm drawing out 5-petaled flowers, but since I'm only drawing out 2, I'm going to make this one fairly large compared to the previous one that we drew. And at the center of the flower, I'm going to draw out dots as pollen for the flower. I'm also going to add 1 leaf for each flower to finish it off. And then for the last flower, I'm going to create 3 stems again, and I'm going to draw out tiny curved lines to create a ball of flower. I'm going to make 3 of these, and for the leaves, I'm going to balance the large ball of flowers by drawing large leaves. For the stems and the leaves, I'm going to be using a mix of Viridian Green and Aurelin Yellow, but later on I also decided to add some Prussian Blue for the last few flowers. So you guys know the drill. I'm just going to swatch a bit of these colors to see some of the different types of green tones I can create with just mixing those colors. We are finally ready to paint the first flower. I'm going to keep this one simple and just use one color, which is Cobalt Violet Light. And I'm going to paint the flowers first for this since I'm only painting 2 of them. Then I'm going to continue on with the stem and the leaves using a smaller brush. My stems here are a bit short, so I'm going to extend it so I have space to paint the leaves. And for the leaves, I'm going to play around with the colors a bit and add a touch more Aurelin Yellow to give a different tone of green. For the next flower, I'm going to use Permanent Yellow Deep, and to start off, I'm going to paint the stems first because I find it much easier to visualize the flower as a whole once I've put down the foundation. Then for the flowers, I'm going to take a little bit of the Permanent Yellow Deep and I'm going to paint them as tiny heart shapes, or you can visualize it as two very small teardrop shape coming together in the middle, and I'm going to place these flowers on all of the stems that I previously painted. For the leaves, I decided to pick a different green tone again and just paint tiny ones where I have extra space on the stem. Moving along to the third flower, I'm going to use a mixture of Jaune Brilliant and Rose Madder to create a really nice peachy color for the flowers. So for this flower, I'm going to start off by painting the stems again, and this time for the flower, I'm going to stick with my size 0 brush. For the flowers, I mix the peach color that I want, and I do this dotting motion to create the texture of the flower. I'm creating a silhouette of a really long oval which comes to a point at the top. I'm going to apply the same thing for the rest of the stems on either side, and while I wait for the paint to dry, I'm going to skip to paint the leaves, one for each of the stems. And once I'm done with the leaves, I'm going to mix a touch more Viridian green to the green that I used previously for the leaf color and make a darker tone of green. And this is to paint the line for the middle of the leaf. Once I'm done with the leaves and the flowers have dried off, I'm going to add another layer following the dotting motion to create a bit more texture. Moving along to the next flower, I'm going to use the colors Cobalt Violet Light and Mineral Violet. Because this filler flower has quite a few stems for the flowers, I'm going to start off by painting the stems again, just so I feel a bit more secure about the placement. Once I'm done painting the stems, I'm going to first load my brush with the Cobalt Violet Light, and I'm using a thin consistency for this. Then I start painting the flowers one petal at a time. I'm making sure that the petals only touch at the very tip to keep the flowers looking dainty and light. Once I've placed down the flowers, I'm going to load my brush with the Mineral Violet and just paint a tiny dot in the middle of each of the flowers. And because the flower is still slightly wet, it's going to spread out slightly. To finish it off, I'm just going to paint 3 small leaves for each of the larger stem and 1 large leaf at the bottom. For the 5th flower, I'm going to use the colors Permanent Yellow Deep and Cadmium Orange. For this, again, I'm going to start by painting the stems first, and then switching to my Permanent Yellow Deep color, I'm going to start painting the flowers by just painting each line one by one. And then while the paint is still wet, I'm going to add a touch of Cadmium Orange where the flower is connected to the stem and create a very subtle gradation. Once I'm done with the flowers, I'm going to paint small leaves for where I feel like there needs to be a leaf. If there's a certain area that is quite empty, you don't really have to follow what you've previously drawn because what you painted might be slightly different. So if you feel like there's a space that's looking a bit too empty, it's okay to add a small leaf or an extra flower. For the next one, I'm going to be using the color Crimson Lake. I added the Prussian blue because this is where I started adding a little bit of blue into the green mix, because I feel for this one I wanted a bit more of a deeper darker green than what I could get with only the Viridian. So for this one, I used my small brush to paint the stems first, like any of the other flowers. And the difference is because I want the leaves quite large, I'm going to paint that down first before I added the berries. Once I've placed down all of the leaves, then I switch to the Crimson Lake to paint small circles for each of the empty stems. For each of the stem, I'm going to be painting 3 berries, but if you're painting this at a slightly larger scale and you want to put more berries, you can also do that and just adjust according to what you painted previously for the stem and the leaves. Next, we're going to move on to the 7th flower, and for this I'm going to be using the colors Manganese Blue and Prussian Blue. By the way, the Manganese Blue and Cadmium Orange that I tend to use in a lot of my videos are by Winsor & Newton, and as most of you know, the rest of my colors that I use is from my Holbein set. So if you have the same set as mine and you don't have those 2 colors, that's okay because it's actually a different brand. Anyway, because this flower is very simple, it's also going to be the basic 5-petal flower that we painted previously, but this one is going to be slightly larger since there's only 2 of them. I'm going to be using the Manganese Blue to paint the flowers first. Then I want to wait for the blue to dry off. So meanwhile, I'm going to paint the leaves. Since the flowers are quite large for this, I'm going to balance off with larger leaves, and I'm going to keep it simple by just painting 1 for each flower. Then once the Manganese Blue is dry, I'm going to add the Prussian Blue on top for the center of the flower, and make sure that it's quite dry or else your paint will spread like what it previously did for mine. So I waited a little bit more and then just painted dots on top. We're finally onto the final flower now, and for this I'm going to be using the colors Permanent Yellow Deep and Quin Opera. Like any of the other flowers, I'm going to start off by painting the stems. Then once I'm done, I'm going to load my brush with the Permanent Yellow Deep first and follow the dotting motion that I did in the previous flower, but instead of the oval silhouette, I'm going to create more of a round silhouette, kind of like a pom-pom. While the yellow is still wet, I'm then going to place the Quin Opera at the bottom part of the flower where it connects to the stem, so it creates a nice soft gradation from a light pinkish orange to the yellow top. And then I'm just going to repeat this for all of the stems. To finish this flower off, I'm going to paint the large leaves, but for this I want the leaf to be drooping down so it gives a different feel to the painting. Looking at all of the flowers, I feel like the first one is looking a bit boring compared to the rest, so at the end I decided to add a touch of Prussian Blue for the center of the 4-petaled flowers. So that's basically it for these mini filler flowers. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as the mini single flowers and still learned something new from this video. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I will see you at the next video. Bye!